earlier on this week, there was a story that I just had to pinch myself, as I seem to have to do more and more regularly now, where it makes me question my grip on reality. The headline was, government agrees to call pregnant women mothers. Well, I'm glad that the government's finally agreed to call pregnant women mothers. I mean, I don't understand what's going on here. The government had agreed to change this bill, which was about ministers being, about pregnant women being allowed maternity leave, so that it used the term mother rather than person. On the line right now is somebody who has been very, very vocal, in fact, done some fascinating things on this kind of field, really, is rapper, author, podcaster, coach, Oxford graduate, Zuby, who is on the line for us right now to talk about this. Zuby, have we all gone a bit too far? Are we getting a bit woke here, and actually we're just kind of ignoring actual hard science?
Yeah, I mean, this stuff went too far many, many years ago, and for whatever reason, the UK and the Anglosphere in general, it seems to be quite unique to the Anglosphere. UK, Canada, America, etc., seem to have taken this obsession with, ignoring reality, manipulating language, and going against actual biology and science, seemingly to try to appease, 0. I don't know what % of the population. So yeah, there's a lot of language manipulation going on. Some people would argue that the intentions behind this are good. I don't think that they are. And it's also just nonsensical. I don't really know why this is even a discussion at this point. It's kind of bizarre to me.
And the reason, one of the reasons anyway, why I got you on was that you actually did something, I think it was, to prove a point, I suppose, really, where the discussion at the time was about whether or not, essentially, people who were born men should be able to compete in women's sports. And you decided, I believe, just tell our listeners what you did, essentially. You just went into the gym and set a world record, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, so this is actually the 2-year anniversary of this the other day. So, I broke the British women's deadlift record very easily in my weight class. I also broke the bench press record several times very easily, given that I'm a man. So it wasn't particularly difficult for me with all my years of training. But it was just to highlight the absurdity of this whole notion that biological men don't have any strength or physical advantages over women magically in the past few years, despite the fact that all throughout centuries and millennia, men have always had a physical strength advantage and speed advantage over women, which is why sports are divided by sex to begin with. But again, there's like a very, very tiny minority, but very loud number of people who are trying to warp this. And ultimately, it's not going to impact men negatively. I think it's very clear and obvious for biological reasons that the impact has been and is going to be on women and women's safety and women's security in particular areas. So as funny as it is, and it's fun to make jokes about, like I did in that tweet, which went very viral. It is making, it's using satire to make actually a serious point. And again, it's strange that this is even a discussion, raging on for years and years. We're literally here debating if men can get pregnant and if men have a strength advantage over women, and people are this shouldn't be some argument where people are divided politically or socially or anything like that, and it never has been up until the past few years. So it's all ideologically driven. It's not based on reality. It's purely based on ideology, and it's not something that should be forced upon people in such a way.
But you're right. I mean, there are very real world consequences. I was reading not that long ago, actually, about a high school, I think it was in Cardiff, which has turned all of its toilets into unisex toilets because there was one pupil, I think in the GCSE year, who had decided they were going, a formerly male pupil who decided they were identifying as a woman. And so in order to make sure that this pupil felt accommodated, they decided that the toilets in the school were going to be unisex. And the real world consequence of that was girls were going home during their lunch breaks to use their toilets at home. They refused to use the toilet. Sure. If you have sisters, I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on things like unisex toilets? Is it about time that we just grew up and got to, is this sort of an outdated old-fashioned value to say men must be here and women must be there? Or do you understand the psychology that, perhaps women find a toilet to be a sanctuary?
Look, if women want to have their own toilets sex segregated, or men want to have their own sex segregated toilets, changing rooms, sports, etc., as has always been, there's nothing wrong with that. We're not saying we're going to segregate society across the board in a I grew up in Saudi Arabia, right? So I've seen gender segregated areas in general, public areas, right? Restaurants, etc. And this is not what anybody is proposing. Men and women get along perfectly fine. But again, for very obvious reasons, it's no surprise that if you're talking about sports, changing rooms, toilets, prisons, any private areas, there are certain areas where people want to have sanctuaries, right? I assume that if I go to the gym when they open, and I wander into the women's changing room with my beard and my penis, etc., that the women might feel a little bit threatened or uncomfortable, even if I tell them that I identify as a woman, and that's perfectly reasonable. And it makes no sense to put this on 50% plus of the population based on what, again, less than 1% of the population even wants. Even a lot of people who are actually, this is one of those situations where it seems like a lot of the people pushing for this are not even transgender, transsexual themselves. It's just, these ideologues who want to ram this thing down people's throats. Whereas I think most people who are actually trans just kind of want to get on with life and be treated fairly and equally, which is cool.
Zuby, I'd like to keep you on the line if that's okay, because Les has just called up. Les has called on 03444991000. And Les, I believe we can go to you now. You don't think there's any big deal whatsoever with having unisex toilets or anything like this?
Hi there, and really loving the show. Hello, Alex. And
hi.
To say before about it being discussed in a unisex toilet, but what is it you have at home?
Well, that's my family. Those are family members, and I don't feel remotely. If I'm in the toilet at home, the door is locked behind me. I know that, actually I live by myself, but, if I had visitors there, they're people I know very well, family members. When you're in a public place and you want to use the bathroom as a woman, there's various things that you might be doing in there, whether it's your time of the month, whether you want to top up your mascara, whether you're having a tearful phone conversation. And I think that for me personally, I would feel massively, embarrassed, but also to some degree quite threatened if I was in a restroom, sitting in a toilet, albeit, behind a closed cubicle door, and I could hear male voices outside. I think it would petrify me. And I think that's the case for most females, whether people can understand that or not. I actually think that's the case. So why then, for the sake of not offending someone?
Can you remember when you last went on an aeroplane? And
about 3 months ago.
Same there. Well, that's a unisex toilet to me. And it doesn't matter what's going on outside. You're totally sealed. You're in a cubicle. You can do whatever you wish, and then wipe the basin after you and leave. I think that's how all toilets should be. We have. Can I jump
in here?
Go on, Zuby.
I don't think that men should be dictating to women what they should be feeling comfortable with or threatened by. And I say this as someone who is not any type of feminist or anything like that, but it's pretty rich for me to be saying, I should be able to wander into a female toilet, and the women should just be okay with it. If they're not comfortable with it, then they're not comfortable with it, and that's fine.
Because you're implying it's an open toilet with women walking around. I'm not. I'm talking about the type of washroom we have on an airplane.
Okay, look, that already exists. I don't think the concerns are around a single isolated toilet.
That's how it should be. That's how they should be in gyms and in public places. They should.
But why? But why? Who is it affecting? Who is it affecting negatively to actually have those toilets separately? One understands on an aeroplane with reduced capacity, you can't have toilet blocks for men, toilet blocks for women. It just would not work. But at the same time, when you're on an aeroplane, you sort of shuffle out of your seat, go to the toilet, and you probably spend as little time in there as possible and get out again. Whereas actually the toilet can represent so much more. I'd argue specifically for women, actually, because we've got a lot of other things that we deal with that men don't. And who does it affect negatively, either from the trans community or from the male community, to say these are separate toilet blocks? I don't understand how that is harmful and why that should be changed.
Les, if you, I don't know what your situation is family-wise or anything like that. If you had a child, would you let it assign its own gender?
I'm not going there. And that wasn't the argument I called up about. I'm calling up about specific units available to use as a washroom, and what we have on an airplane is perfectly adequate for everybody, children, adults, and whatever your gender status is.
I think I think, the obvious thing is there's a difference here between an individual toilet with single capacity and occupancy and a block as you'd have in, let's say, a gym, or in certain public areas where just due to space, or a nightclub, say, right? In a nightclub where you've got, the women's toilets and you've got the men's toilets. I don't think, again, a lot of women wouldn't be totally comfortable with guys being in there, and that's fine.
No, and I agree. And even more reason to have an individual unit, like on an airplane. Maybe a bit more spacious if you can afford it, because it is cramped on a plane.
All right, I want to I'm just gonna get moving on here, lads. Thank you very, very much for calling in there. 03444991000. And the reason why we're talking about all of this with the wonderful Zuby, who joins us over Zoom as well, so all of our YouTube viewers can see him, is that the government has agreed to change a bill allowing ministers to take maternity leave so that it uses the term mother as opposed to person. The thinking here is, of course, that actually why not actually just call women, really? And now, Zuby, you have got a book, Strong Advice, Guide to Fitness for Everybody. So you are obviously a very physically fit and active individual. But Alex, I wanted to get your take on the idea that you could have trained your entire life as a female athlete, and then you get to the Olympic Games or something, and someone like Zuby comes along and smashes the deadlift record, or runs faster than you in the 100 meters and beats you. I mean, how would that make you feel?
Well, it's crazy, isn't it? Because I remember a couple of Olympics ago, there was the uproar about Caster Semenya and, whether or not she should be competing in female sports, because there are physiological differences between men and women. And she isn't a man. She is a hermaphrodite, I think, biologically. But the big question when it comes to sports especially is things like the differences in hormones. When you look at professionally competing sports, you actually have to be tested on whether you're taking things like testosterone stimulants and so on and so forth, which would give you a competitive advantage. And certainly we know that the endocrinological makeup of the genders is entirely different. And it's very obvious that if you had, say, a wrestling match between a man and a woman, the likelihood is, unless you've got a particularly extraordinarily gigantic woman, the man is likely to have more physical strength. And I think, as a female athlete in a circumstance where you've worked very, very hard to get to the top of your sport, it would be utterly galling. I mean, that's the end of your profession. That's the end of your livelihood. And it's also not just that, it is potentially risky for competitors, especially in physical contact sports.
Zuby, I wanted to get your take actually on why you feel as though we're kind of bowing down to a lot of these people, because as you rightly said there, it seems to be a very small percentage of people who would want things like a bill that's specifically about women who are pregnant, to not mention the fact that they're women, to call them people and things like that. Why do we bow down to a lot of this woke brigade, do you think?
Cowardice, to put it in one word. Right? People don't want to be called names. So it's very easy. What's happened in a lot of things now is that the people who are doing the bullying are pretending that they are the bullied, right? So they're taking up this mantle as if they're some sort of, warriors, social justice warrior, whatever they want to call themselves, activists. And they're using that as a club to bully and call other people names anytime someone expresses a view that goes opposed to their own ideology. And a lot of people are worried about this so-called cancel culture. People are worried about, simply being called names. People are worried about, being harassed on social media. People are worried about their job security, all these kind of things. And people want to feel like they're, a good person, shall we say. And so as a result, despite the fact most people are not on board with these ideas, the vast majority of people either are apathetic, or they don't think it's going to go as far as it's gone and is going, or they're simply just not bold and courageous enough to draw any line in the sand and just tell the truth. And the truth is that men do not have menstruations, males do not get pregnant nor give birth, men do not breastfeed. These are facts. This isn't even simply in the human species. This is across the entire animal kingdom. And none of this stuff magically changed in 2012 or whenever people started obsessing over this stuff. So people need to be willing to just tell the truth. You can tell the truth with compassion. I'm not seeing many people arguing out here that people should have any rights taken away, or people shouldn't be treated with dignity or fairly as human, whether they fit into the majority or they're in some sort of minority. That's not the argument people are making. So I think people need to just stand up and be courageous and just be willing to tell the truth, like regardless of being worried of offending people.
Thank you very much, Zuby. It's compelling stuff. And we've had a lot of people get in touch on Twitter about this, as you can imagine, at talkRADIO.